So this is quiz 1, question 2, question about a repetitive dive. You have just completed a dive which put you in pressure group R. If you complete a 45-minute surface interval, how deep could you go if you now want to do a second dive of 50 minutes? So it is a 2-dive question, and we're going to use our standard chart, 2-dive chart, to enter the information from the question to make it then easy for us to use the ERDPml to calculate. So what is the question telling us? You have just completed a dive which put you in pressure group R. So we can enter R in at the pressure group after dive 1. The next bit of information we're given is the length of the surface interval, 45 minutes, and we can enter that in our surface interval. The last bit of information we're given is that the second dive we want to do is for 50 minutes, and that is basically where the information ends. I now need to get out my ERDPml and turn it on. I need to turn the sound off, and I need to decide what mode I should go into. Well, it's asking me how deep I could go, which might make you think, all right, maximum depth mode. We are, of course, going to have to use the maximum depth mode to answer this question. But before we can use the maximum depth mode, we need to know what pressure group we're going to be in at the beginning of this second dive. So in order to calculate that, we're firstly going to have to use the dive planning mode. So I'm going to hit mode. It's showing me dive planning. I can click enter. It's now asking me, is it a multi-level dive? There's no mention of multi-level. And now it's at this point that it's asking me first dive, yes or no. Well, it's not the first dive. I've done a dive. It put me in pressure group R. So I am going to say no to the first dive question. Now the ERDPml is asking another question, another yes-no question. The question is pressure group after the surface interval. What it's basically saying is, do you know the pressure group after the surface interval? Looking across at my chart, do I know the pressure group after the surface interval? No. That's the whole reason I'm in this mode right now. That's the information I need to find out. So I do not know the pressure group after the surface interval. So I can click no here. It now asks me, well, what is your pressure group before the surface interval? I know that, it's R, so I can enter that in. And it asks me what my surface interval is. I know that, it's 45 minutes, so I can enter that in. It now tells me that my pressure group after the surface interval would be pressure group I. So I can enter in that the pressure group after the surface interval is pressure group I. Now I've entered that in, the next thing I need to do is change mode. Now I know what my pressure group is at the beginning of this dive, and I know how long I want to go for. At this point, I can use the maximum depth mode. So I'm going to press and hold mode reset to reset the ERDPml. I'm then going to hit the mode button 3 times to get me to the maximum depth mode and click enter. It's asking me first dive, yes or no. Hopefully you're realizing the answer to this question is no, it's not the first dive. It's the second dive that I need to get the information on. So I can click no, and it asks me what is the pressure group after the surface interval. Well, I just calculated that. It's pressure group I. So I can enter in I and click enter. How long do I want to dive for? 50 minutes. That's written down on my diagram. Enter. Tells me a safety stop is required, not critical information to me to answer this question, so I can just click enter, and it tells me that the maximum depth would be 45 feet.